Wheel of Genre, the show for readers who read Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness and said, yeah, I like it, but what if we made the river the protagonist? Oh, and also, we made it hate us. Okay, that one was a stretch, but each month we spin the wheel and land on a new genre. Spies, mysteries, horror, romance, SF. It's all on the shelf. And right now we are reading through every short story in Ann and Jeff VanderMeer's anthology, The Weird, including this one, Algernon Blackwood's The Willows. I'm Zach, and this week I am really interested in the style. This incredible style that is pushing to anthropomorphize every single thing in the environment here.
Even the sand. I'm Bob. I'm interested. Algernon Blackwood's life was just so cool, and he makes our regular little lives just... Anyway, he is very cool. He is the man. He is basically Nietzsche, but if Nietzsche was writing horror stories. He was huge into climbing. He was even a mountain biker, and he actually did trips on the Danube, which this story is about. He did 2 different trips, and apparently all of his writing is either his personal, all of his stories anyway, are based on personal experience or experiences from his friends. He was super cool, traveled everywhere, and joined all the weirdest organizations.
Wow. You just made me jealous for the life of a man I've never met.
I'm jealous too, Zach.
So that really paints an interesting picture about this trip down the Danube. So what we have is this narrator who's going down with a very practical Swede. He's
a practical man.
And what I like about it is that what we have here is essentially these two characters playing off of each other. It's an emotional dynamic between these two characters as they enter into the wilderness. And yet it's not just them interacting with each other. It's not them balancing or unbalancing or unsettling each other. It's the environment itself, which becomes its own kind of character here that is constantly in an interplay with them and unsettling them.
You know what I like too? So they are in this terrible place and it is unsettling them. It's tearing them apart in ways like in their mind. But what was really nice is they need each other in this. Often you'll have a horror story where there's the one dumb friend who just gets eaten right away. Here, they need each other because they both teach each other lessons. They are also there in this weird situation where everything, even the willows, even the sand, even the wind, it's all against them. It feels like this horrible... almost god or set of gods. It's these things from another dimension plaguing them. And if they lose it, they're dead. They're gone. They're done for. So these two guys have to be there camping. They have to do the regular camping things, cook meals, but they also have to remind each other, don't go insane. Like, don't think about this thing. Don't let it drive you crazy. They need each other to survive.
Yeah, and that dynamic is so interesting because, you have he's the very practical Swede. You have someone who is very calm, collected, but also acts as a kind of, I guess you could say he acts like a guide, right? Mm-hmm. He seems to know things that our narrator doesn't. For example, he says, don't think of them. They are aware that we're here, but they can't see us. They can see our psyches. It's almost like it's like 19th century spiritualism, they're not material beings and they don't, and not being material, they don't interact with our material selves. They interact with our spiritual, our psychological selves. So in that sense, if you don't think of them, then you won't call their attention to you. And likewise, the flip side of that is if you totally deny it, which is what our protagonist was trying to do. He's trying to absolutely deny that these things are even there in the first place. The shock of when they actually enter into your conscious mind is enough also to draw them in. So according to the Swedish character, the way you deal with these interdimensional beings is simultaneously to accept their existence and yet also, kind of mutter under your breath, I don't believe in you. I don't believe in you. Or I'm not worried about you. Think happy thoughts. Think happy thoughts.
Yeah, think happy prosaic thoughts. He just starts thinking about lunch, fun things from home, and that is what keeps them at bay. I think that is so interesting. It's very different, it feels like, from H.P. Lovecraft, and H.P. Lovecraft was a huge fan of this story. But Lovecraft, if you come across something like this, one of these elder gods, one of these interdimensional beings, it's too much, and you lose all sanity, and the people around you lose sanity too. You can't not only can you not comprehend it, you just can't survive after experiencing it. But this is almost more positive. You know, if we get these things out of our minds, or at least if we don't let them bother us so much, we can survive. It's like a survival guide for weird fiction, for being inside of this situation. It is kind of, the story itself is almost is a blueprint for weird fiction, and we can look at why. But I feel like it's also a survival guide for characters trapped in a weird fiction situation.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like how you compared it to Lovecraft because, you know, with Lovecraft, there's a certain inevitability to these kind of monsters. Like, you know, if you see it, you have no hope but to go insane if you glimpse upon them. Like, for example, the story in the Mountains of Madness, you know, he takes one glimpse back as they're flying away and he sees this monstrosity that ruins him. There's a helplessness to a kind of Lovecraftian monster. And I think in a sense, there might be a helplessness to the other kinds of weird entities or weird experiences that we have encountered in this anthology so far. Alfred Kubin's The Other Side, you know, the city is deteriorating, not just humanity, you know, falling asleep and the animals moving in, but, you know, it strikes like a disease in which people have no control over. And it's really the same sort of thing with F. Marion Crawford's The Screaming Skull. It's a curse. And you can't escape it once this skull appears to have marked you for, you know, for the biting, basically. And yet here we have something that to me is even more terrifying than a deteriorating city or a screaming skull. And yet the characters are able to utilize something that's extremely human, their relationship with each other, their emotions, their self-control, to overcome monsters of, you know, strange dimensions.
The Screaming Skull, what a great story.
Oh my God. Oh, I just got a PTSD flashback.
It's a scary story. Oh, I need more cough medicine. The helplessness. There is helplessness in this too. However, there's this ineffable awe. There's this crazy experience. It's the sublime almost. You go out into nature. It's romantic in a way, but you are helpless still. But you're right. It's different because they don't just give in to being helpless. You know, they figure out these little tiny ways to get by. So these things that we can't even see that seem to be the willows moving, that seem to be the shadows moving, that seem to be willows converging and leaning over you, they don't kill you because you just stayed calm. But it's absolutely terrifying, I think. It could just be a nice little camping story. I mean, you know, there's things spooking you. The bamboo is rustling, kind of going, ee. There's no bamboo in this story, but that's from my own personal horrors. But this, they get through, and I think the guy who doesn't absolutely terrifies me. We don't know who it is, but we eventually come across someone who doesn't get away, and I found that very frightening.
This intrusion of a kind of third character, I think they call him almost like a sacrificial victim, is really interesting to me. I don't want to call it like a deus ex machina, but they certainly, saved by the skin of their teeth by the presence of an unknown third character who happens to be taken in their place. But what's so interesting to me is, you know, I think somewhere along the line we said, hey, we think that with these weird horror stories, these weird fiction stories, the formula is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of doubt, and then a final resolute, terrifying, uncanny image, which, you know, really ties a bow on the story, really reveals to the reader exactly what was going on. That it's no longer a question of, is this prosaic or is this weird? You know, this one final image actually tells us it's weird. And what I was expecting to happen in this story was some kind of, some kind of, Tolkien style talking tree. You know, I was expecting.
Yes, I did too. The ends.
Yes. I was expecting the Willows to try to get them, which I think is a pretty fair assumption of what would happen. But it's kind of a bait and switch, because what we learn is that these interdimensional beings, I guess they're feeding, and the environment starts to get these funnel-shaped sinkholes, and they say, what are those? And they say, don't even think about it. Don't even think about it. If it is what I think it is, I don't even want to say it out loud. Okay. But then they find this man's corpse, and he has the same funnel-shaped sinkholes all over his face. Not what I was expecting, and yet perhaps significantly more eerie than a walking, talking, killing tree ever could be.
I don't really find anything in movies or books frightening except for this and Mulholland Drive. And I feel like the fear is really similar to me. Now, I have a bias. I'm deathly afraid of having holes all over my face. So, but anyway, I think this feels like a phobia, but in reverse. You have your stimulus, and then you are just kind of thinking about that thing for many hours or many days. It affects your sleep. It bothers you, and you have to ignore it to the point of not ignoring it. It's very similar in this story. If you think too much about these things that are coming to visit you, it's going to bother you. And if you try to not think about them too much, it's going to get even worse. In Mulholland Drive, there's that scene that is a recollection of a dream. They're two men are sitting at the cafe, and he says, "Look, I'm going to tell you about a dream that I keep having where you and I are sitting here across from each other, and it happens the same way every time. And you tell me it's not a big deal, and then I take you out, and we go and see it. And then behind the dumpster, when they walk out there, it's just this horrifying face that moves out and confronts you. And the guy falls over because it's his fear that happens again and again and again, and it's just a loop." And this reminded me a lot of that, where we have the phobia or the really terrifying thing only happen at the end. And you're right, it is a bait and switch. It just happens. It's the thing coming out from the dumpster. And to me, having this promise that we will go mad, that something will terrify us, and then still trying not to go mad, and then it just is there. And we can take it or leave it or just experience it however we want. It's similar to Lovecraft, but something was much scarier about this. It just very scared me, this story.
I really like your comparison to David Lynch there. That scene in particular is a really good one because it's kind of framed as a dream. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things about dreams, I guess, is that, the idea is that whatever you see in your dreams is supposed to be like a symbol of other things. So, whatever bundles of meanings that you associate with that one image could be something else. So you see something, but the meaning of it, or what it actually is, the truth of it, is actually something a little bit different. It's distorted in a way. And I think these willows, I guess you could say the metaphysical nature of these willows, what the in-universe logic of these willows functions in a largely similar way to a dream, in the sense that what we're told early on is, they look like willows, but they're not willows. They're actually, beings that we can't comprehend. So our brain symbolizes them as willows. And what we come to understand is that our protagonist sees them as a heavily personified nature. And yet his partner there sees them almost as something entirely different. He recognizes the area as a kind of old magical, like Greco-Roman deity space, like sacrificial space, a home of the old pagan gods. So what you have is something that exists, and yet subjectively they can't understand it. So they're both experiencing it in different ways. I love that. I love that so much.
Zach, earlier you mentioned he feels like he's been involved. I can't remember what you said, but you said something about late 19th century spiritualism. And he was involved in a lot of those movements, directly involved. He was members of some of these movements. He joined the Theosophical Society of Toronto. He was part of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, I think of the First Order. And these are all things that were founded in the late 19th century. The Golden Dawn is 1887. And it's interesting, a lot of these authors, some of them who we have read, are getting involved in this. To give you a quick rundown, the Golden Dawn is founded in 1887, and there are a lot of authors that we've read that were involved. Crowley, not an author, but, well, I guess kind of. He was involved. Doyle was involved, but he had his hand in a lot of these organizations, so it's kind of unclear how deeply he was involved. But Yates was very much involved, Arthur Machen. People say that Bram Stoker was involved, but I don't think that's true. I think there's no evidence to say that. Maybe he was. But it's a combination. It's Hermetic, but what that actually means is a combination of Hermes and Thoth. It's not just the regular god Hermes. And what they would do in this first order, which I think he was a part of, was mostly theurgy and spiritual development. And theurgy is like divine magic. So they were doing different kinds of magic and trying to find the truth in many different systems. But Blackwood was really interesting because he was joining all sorts of different organizations, even the Ghost Society. But he seemed interested in studying everything.
That's really interesting. And I have a kind of pocket theory that I want to see play out as we read this anthology. But my current pocket theory is that most weird or even SF authors, they're actually they're a lot better if either they actually believe, well, primarily if they actually like sincerely believe in some of the things that they're saying, or like some of the worlds that they build is probably a better way of putting that. Our primary example might be someone like Philip K. Dick, who, towards the end of his life actually believed that he had slipped into different timelines. He was writing stories that were based around his own ideas of the truth of the universe, which is really, really interesting. But then you think about the difference between a kind of just like story that's meant to give an aesthetic sense of either wonder or haunting versus someone who sincerely believes that if these kinds of beings exist, this is how they would interact with our world. This is how they would interact with the individual subjective person. I think that you get a much more rich and well thought out world. And that probably even extends to SF too. People who are actually interested in like, UFOs and non-human intelligence, stuff like that, they probably have a much richer idea of how to create a SF universe with aliens in it. This is my theory. Put it in our back pocket and let's finish this anthology and revisit it.
Well, I think you're right. Here's my suspicion, Zach. I think you're on the right track 100% because I can't remember where this was, in one of his forwards to one of his books, he says, it's in a letter to a theorist. He says, Blackwood says, my fundamental interest, I suppose, is signs and proofs of other powers that lie hidden in us all, the extension, in other words, of human faculty. And I think when he is exploring nature and he's exploring not just the ineffable, like, wow, nature is amazing, but this kind of energy almost in nature, and then our going out into nature, discovering something about ourselves and studying these esoteric philosophies or different religions, finding something about ourselves. So he wasn't really married to any of the ideas necessarily that he's studying, but he's devoted to them and he's devoted to some kind of truth. And it's interesting, I think, to be a horror writer. And not just to scare the pants off of every, that's great. But he wants to scare people in a way that wakes them up to something. So he is really devoted to what he's doing. He wants people to have an experience that they wouldn't otherwise have. And I think that is so cool.
Yeah. And, I think you're right. You don't have to sincerely put all your chips down on any one idea of how the universe works. But I think to have studied these things, to have studied these kind of esoteric ideas or these, these ideas of powers that are, not human, maybe, existing in other dimensions. And, if you study those kinds of things, you have richer ideas of how these things could interact with the characters in your story. If I had to guess, the idea of, these creatures from elsewhere kind of bleeding into our world, and that bleeding through, coming through in the sound of this kind of ominous ringing sound, sound waves being kind of, energy vibrations, and it's kind of coming in like holes in the fabric of the reality. You can hear the sound coming in. If I had to guess, like stuff like that would probably be something that you might get in a kind of esoteric manuscript, like the kind of idea that you would say, oh, that is good. That is rich. That is interesting. Let's add that onto the Willows. Let's add that on to our weird story.
Let's ride this weird idea into a weird story. What you're saying. So I've got a question though, because this is really bothering me about this. The idea of I'm devoted to nature. I'm devoted to the expansion of human mind, human consciousness, but also this is terrifying. And he says this. I'm going to read this. He says, the early feeling that everything was alive, a dim sense that some kind of consciousness struggled through every form, even that a sort of inarticulate communication with this other life was possible. Could I but discover the way, these moods colored its opening wonder. So he wants to discover the way with the communication with this other side. But it also sounds like, earlier you were saying the ringing, that terrible noise. Sometimes they say, it feels like it's coming from under the water. It feels like it's from the other side of the island. But then sometimes it feels like it's in my own head. So it's almost like it's this awakening of consciousness in these guys too. So it's not just that the reality around you, the space around you is pregnant with this thing. Your whole being is too, and your ability to perceive, I guess, your ability to be conscious is also going to be ruptured or damaged or taken over, possessed, I guess, by this thing. And so my issue is, yes, this is all very beautiful. We go to this beautiful island with all of these beautiful willows, but then it is just horrifying. And these creatures or these things, whatever they are from this fourth dimension, they seem malicious, or at least they seem so indifferent that it feels malicious to us as humans. How do you feel about this? Like, nature is beautiful, but maybe it's also indifferent. But then there's this terrible thing that doesn't care at all, and it will just drill us full of holes.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a thread that will be taken up by much of cosmic horror, large, inconceivable, indifferent things that either don't care about us or view us as either tools or food or just, a byproduct. Maybe we're waste, something like that. So it's definitely an idea that has a lot of legs in the history of this kind of writing. But how do I feel about it? I think it's interesting that someone who loves nature so much could settle on this idea, basically. Someone who spends a lot of time, who took supposedly this boat trip down the Danube and who is a mountain climber and things. They do this and they fundamentally decide that nature is either hostile or it doesn't care. It's not the kind of picture postcard view of nature where it's like, oh, what a beautiful mountain. It makes me feel good. It's a nice, pretty scene, with great charm, things like that. No, it's you stand on the mountain and you say, my God, this thing was here for 10,000 years before I was born, and it will be here for 100,000 years after I have died. I am nothing compared to this mountain. It's a much different view of nature than I think is really popular now. I don't know. I'm not in touch with the nature people lately.
I don't go outside. I feel like at the beginning, though, it is cute. Like the Danube is described, it's personified so much and in so many different ways. When they first see it, he talks about being a little trickle. Sometimes it's so small that it actually dries up and pops up later again. And he talks about it going through towns, and it's like it's laughing. It's like it's giggling because it's enjoying being around people. And it's only when they get to this island where it's surrounded by these willows and the Danube seems to be choking them because it's choking the island, making it smaller and smaller. There's something about this place, this anthology is put together by the VanderMeers, and it was making me think, is the island kind of like an Area X? Is it a place that is not exactly conscious, but feels like a mind almost in a way? It seems like a living, breathing thing that has kind of not exactly what we would call intentions, but that we would feel as intentions. And it was making me think of that. I don't know. Do you feel like is there Area X vibes for you?
There is Area X vibes, primarily in the idea that things that appear normal might have some kind of hidden intelligence behind them, hidden perspective behind them. In the VanderMeer novels, there's this idea like, oh, they have a house plant, and it looks like a house plant. It's just a normal potted plant, and yet it won't die. No matter what they do, it won't die. And you get the sense when you look at that plant that somehow the plant is staring back at you. Like this thing which doesn't have eyes, you get the sense that it's watching you. There's what that tells you is that there's a kind of rationality or intelligence that is merely using the plant as a cover. You see a plant, but it's not a plant. It's something else. That was an incredible element in the Area X, the Southern Reach, at this point, tetralogy. And here we get largely the same thing, except it's much, much more explicit. Well, I get the sense that his writings on the Danube are meant to be very literary. His writings on those trees are meant to be quite literal. There's this great moment that I didn't catch until I read the story a second time, which is as they come up on this island, he says, the willows were dancing around and shaking their hands as if to like welcome us. I don't have the quote right now, but basically you get and celebrating, I think was the word. And the first time you read that, you're like, wow, what a positive image. They're being welcomed by the trees, which are dancing. Wow. But then on the second time you read that, you can't help but feel like you can't help but receive this image of, kind of like a pagan sacrifice, people dancing around an altar and saying, yes, come, welcoming the thing that's about to be sacrificed closer. It takes on a much more sinister resonance to it.
No wonder he's a Swede. It's just like Midsummer. Come to my village.
Yeah, okay. I was like, where you go? He likes IKEA?
Yeah, well, you like meatballs? Come with me. Yeah. I'm going to make you into a meatball. What do you think? So again, Area X, there's the Whitby quote. Whitby is great, and he has this theory about what is going on in Area X. A quick, aside. He says one organism might peer out from another organism, but not live there. It's kind of like this fourth dimensional being kind of looking out. But it made me think of potential and I guess things that could grow out of consciousness or things that could grow out of things that we don't expect them to be. And there are so many moments in this where the main character is doubting what he's seeing. He's saying, when he sees, first he sees, the willows, it looks like they're dancing. He uses a simile. Later he says, no, they're truly moving now. They're coming closer and they're going to kill me. But I know that's not true. I know that is a subjective experience, and my mind has just been so convinced by it that it has made it appear objective to me. It looks like it's really happening in nature, but it's not. And that's a big thing for him and the Swede, like we said earlier. They have to talk each other down and say, if you're having this hallucination, it probably is not a hallucination, but you shouldn't dwell on it anyway. They're not actually going to come and kill you. But it makes me think of potential. Whitby is saying there are things looking out from other things. It made me think of when we think about dark matter, where on Earth is it? We think mathematically we can prove it, but then where is it? Is it far in the outskirts, like a halo around the universe or a galaxy, or is it within matter itself? Or consciousness, where is it? Is it a fundamental principle like gravity or something like that? Is it within really small particles? Who knows? It makes me think of Akira too. I don't know if you ever saw the end of Akira. You ever seen Akira? What a classic!
Not since
classic.
2012. Not since
I
specifically remember where I was living. Okay, I'll rewatch it. Maybe that could be a Patreon episode for us. Zach and Bob watch Akira together.
I'll do it every week. Zach and Bob watch Akira the first time, the second. Anyway, at the very end, after Tetsuo dies, sorry to spoil it, but the camera zooms into, because Tetsuo's little spirit pearl drops into Kanada's hand, and then this camera zooms into black holes and white holes and then into an eye, as if there's a potential within each of these characters or each one of us to become like a nuclear bomb, the potential to be explosive or have a tremendous amount of energy. And when Blackwood is talking about, going through some sort of experience, going into nature, finding something out about yourself, and going to not exactly a higher plane or a higher level of existence, but finding something out that is beyond your current ability to perceive things. I thought that was very cool. And I was just curious, do you think that was very cool? That's a dumb thing to say, but do you think in his devotion to nature and his belief in nature, do you think it's at all similar to our thrill and our excitement in reading horror? Because he spends most of his life either out in nature or writing horror, and he's doing both kind of towards the same goal. Do you think there is anything to horror that might be an awakening of consciousness? I know that's a little too high flown.
Wow.
But yes, I know. Sorry. But do you think there's something about what he's trying to do here?
Well, maybe not horror in general. And by that, I mean, like, you know, I don't know if I think that this story and maybe like, you know, a Jason Voorhees movie, you know, a slasher, a teen slasher are really doing the same thing. But I think that specifically for weird fiction, I think that it's quite possible to use weird fiction to explore questions about the nature of reality and about the nature of human experience and about the nature of the consciousness of things which are not human. What is the consciousness of this plant here, for example? What does it see? What does it see that I can't see? What does it know that I can't know? Questions like this, I think, can be productively explored by weird fiction. And I think that going out into nature, away from the domestic, away from the familiar, and estranging yourself from society allows you to be in positions where it kickstarts your brain into thinking through these kinds of questions.
Have you ever been truly terrified in nature? Have you had an experience like this before?
Are we talking sublime terror? Are we talking fear of life?
Anything. If you've had, I'm thinking fear of life, but if you've had both at the same time.
Been on, let's see. So a couple things, you know, me and some buddies did, you know, a 4-day hiking trip through the woods. Actually went to Zane Grey's cabin. Western fans, rejoice. But, you know, running into a family of bears, you know, that, but it wasn't, you know, piss your pants there. It was just kind of like, whoa, okay, we're awake.
I might have pissed my pants.
And we are backing away slowly. Oh, you know, another time. So a different kind of terror would be another time while camping, my dog jumped into the river. And, you know, it you know, silly dog thought that it could just paddle around. No, it was swept away by the current towards some rocks. And I was like, oh shit. So I had to go jump in the river and risk my own damn life to drag it out and swim down, you know, anyways, that's a different kind of terror. Neither of those terrors, I think, are the kind of terror that would be explored in this kind of story. Have you had any kind of terror?
This really made me think of I had a terror, not a terror, but last year we had a 7.4 earthquake. And I was at school at the time. It was really early in the morning, and it was just like, it was so unreal. You would think in an earthquake, you know, it's just stuff happening underneath you, so things would be kind of bouncing up and like this. It wasn't like that at all. It's like someone just put their giant hands on the whole school and just went, because I just saw everything going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And immediately I just thought, wow, this is not natural at all. This is not nature. This is some sort of weird... So a weird experience, Zach, but that was a strange terror in nature where we all knew we were going to be fine. We all helped all the kids get out. And we all, you know, did the roll call and everything. But there was this feeling of this is not real at all. Mm-hmm. This is a strange nature. And that was almost it wasn't sublime. It was just a weird kind of terror.
Unsettling, uncanny. It derealized you. Okay. I guess earthquakes are a really good example. I mean, I remember one time I was teaching in Korea on the 3rd floor of a building, maybe 4th floor, and we had an earthquake, and it turned out that it wasn't a natural earthquake. It was North Korea detonating nuclear bombs underground. We felt it as an earthquake.
Whoa, yes.
Still alive.
That's its own kind of terror.
Yep.
So, Zach, I want to ask, so speaking of being afraid or being scared, I think in the introduction, they were talking about characters who are either afraid and curious about that fear or curious about the supernatural, or when they cross over and they become too obsessed with that. And that is a big part of this story. If you become too obsessed, if you think about it too much, your goose is cooked, you know, you're done for. What do you think, or what are we going to see with that that teeter-totter of either, okay, I'm okay, I'm just curious in it, to like, oh no, I'm become obsessed and I can't stop this obsession. It becomes compulsive almost, like the phobia. What do you think we're going to see in the future for weird fiction?
That's a really good question. I'll tell you what I see in this story, which is kind of a sideways answer to you, because I think what I see here is what we are going to see more of, which is a main character who is skeptical of it. And or skeptical of the existence, who's starting from a perspective of common reality. The same kind of character that we saw in the Screaming Skull, for example, where the person can't admit that weirdness is afoot. And I might get in trouble for this one, but I think that this kind of character is necessary, and it really irks my pickle. Soils my sandwich. I don't know. It bothers me when I read or like watch book reviewers or read book reviews where they're like, oh, this idiot protagonist, can't he comprehend that he's in the midst of unfathomable terrors? Why must he always seek the prosaic explanation? A simpleton mind. So I'm really going on a rant here, but if these characters went into these stories, and said, oh yeah, we live in a weird universe and we have extra dimensional beings. We have Bigfoot. We got fairies. We got, rivers, which are actually personified great, spirits, something like that. We're not doing weird fiction anymore if the character fundamentally believes in this stuff. We're doing fantasy at that point. We're in a magical universe at that point. We're only doing weird fiction if we start from a baseline of common reality that we all experience and share in the real world, in the non-literary world, is the same here. But then something breaks. And that's how you get that aesthetic feeling. You don't get that from a character who's just up on it all the time. Oh yes, that's Cthulhu, my old buddy. Don't look him in the eyes. It's not fun.
You dolt. You looked Cthulhu in the eye.
Yeah.
Man.
And now you're mad.
Now you're mad. What did you expect? Zach, cheers to the idiots who walk down the dark hallway or the dark staircase. I tried to download this book, this biography on Blackwood through Kindle today. I paid for it, and I couldn't figure it out where it went, so I didn't get to read it. It's like Zoolander looking in the computer. It's in the computer. So I would definitely walk down that staircase, and I would, of course, assume I would just be dead. I'm not going to figure out the riddle. Cthulhu's going to... I'd look in his eye. Twice, probably. Fool me once, shame on you, Cthulhu.
If you got a chance, All right. Well, I guess I should ask you, what do you think that we're going to see a lot more of as we continue our reading?
I'm really curious. I think you're right. We're going to see the people who are skeptical or not. I think what I would really like to see is this devotion to truly pushing the envelope, trying to figure out what is at stake for people and consciousness, and what is at stake for the soul, or Tetsuo's little spirit pearl. What is at stake for us in these experiences, and what can we actually learn through them? Not just I survive another day, I can defeat the whole burrowing monster, the hermit crab monster, but what is different about me? And I think that was one of the main things that he wanted to do, is to try and find something different about our experience, or learn something that we need to learn. I want to see authors that are truly devoted to what they're writing.
Onward. Talk to you later, Bob.
Talk to you later, Zach.